To their eyes, I was someone. To mine, I was no one. I spent 30 years shrinking to fit, smoothing the edges of my soul, whispering where I wanted to scream, smiling while bleeding inside. I made other people's approval my drug, and rejection my death sentence. Yes, I was accepted, but at the cost of losing myself. This video is for those tired of hiding in exchange for emotional crumbs. For those who've erased themselves so thoroughly, for so long, they no longer know where they begin or where they end. What I discovered wasn't beautiful, but it was liberating. They told you that acceptance is about being nice, charismatic, adaptable. That's a lie. Acceptance in this system demands self-erasure. You have to eat yourself alive, silence your instincts, blur your edges, perform like a machine that smiles on cue. Networking culture, personal branding, diplomatic self-control, it's all makeup for a deeper wound, the fear of exclusion. And that's why so many people erase themselves, not by choice, but to survive. No one wants to be alone. So we disappear, piece by piece, inside versions others can tolerate. I was that social ghost, praised, promoted, included. But every yes I gave when I meant no was a symbolic murder. Every swallowed opinion, a dagger in my essence. And the more I was loved, the less I recognized myself. That's the paradox of validation. The more you chase it, the emptier you become. Because love that comes from others often demands that you aren't yourself. And over time, that costs more than you can imagine. It doesn't end with therapy or self-help quotes. It ends with collapse, with chronic anxiety, with imposter syndrome, with existential emptiness even when everything looks fine. Now the masks are falling en masse. Social media reveals too much and no one can keep pretending forever. Emotional burnout is collective. People are breaking down in silence, posting smiles, spiraling inside. What used to be a point of pride, being adaptable, diplomatic, likable, is being exposed for what it always was, a performance. And those of us who couldn't take it anymore have begun to wake up. I was one of them. And I discovered something that might scare you. Beneath your self-erasure, there's rage. Justified, holy rage. And it might just be your way home. Pretending to be someone else was how I survived rejection. But then came the day when being accepted hurt more than being ignored. That's when the lie crumbled. Not on the outside, inside. Because finally, I saw myself. No one is born erased. We're trained into it. Trained to smile when confused, to stay quiet when disturbed, to step back when our body says move forward. Self-erasure is taught in the look that says, don't make a scene, in the teacher who rewards silence, in the friend who withdraws when you show emotion. Slowly you realize, being yourself has consequences, but being acceptable brings rewards. So you choose to survive. You trade authenticity for belonging, desire for diplomacy, truth for performance. And in that silent trade, the soul begins to fade until only a shell remains. Polite, functional, and absolutely hollow. Society applauds the functional and visible, the employee who never questions, the friend who always listens but never speaks, the child who never misbehaves, the partner who never demands. These characters are celebrated because they keep the system running smoothly, efficiently, profitably. That's when erasure becomes identity. You're no longer someone adapting. You are the adaptation. A pliable, agreeable, non-threatening presence. And precisely because of that, disposable. Because someone who never takes up emotional space, never truly bonds. You're liked by everyone, but deeply loved by no one. The pain of self-erasure isn't just the absence of love, it's the absence of self. Because when you're conditioned to be what others expect, anything genuine feels like a mistake, a risk, a scandal. You begin to self-correct automatically, apologize for your existence, justify even your joy. And at some point you forget what it was like to be whole. Because wholeness scares people. It takes up space, it creates friction, it unsettles. And you were trained to be pleasant, to soften your presence, to anesthetize anything that doesn't fit the frame. And so, you keep going, recognized by all, known by none, celebrated at birthdays, erased in silence, a master of seeming light, even while carrying the weight of never being, until something breaks, a crisis, a rupture, a silence too long. And in that vacuum, for the first time, you hear a muffled voice inside, the voice of who you were before you began to please. Behind every easygoing person is a silent fire. It's not peace, it's restraint, not balance, suppression. Self-erasure doesn't destroy your essence, it puts it on mute, like a bomb that learns to sit still. You keep saying yes, smiling politely, accepting jokes that sting, tasks that drain, relationships that bleed, and everyone thinks you're wonderful, balanced, mature. But they don't see what you swallow every time you don't scream, what you kill in yourself every time you whisper, and now's not the time. You become an emotional graveyard, a living museum of your unmet needs. That silent rage seeps into everything. Into the body, as tension and fatigue. Into the mind, as spirals and exhaustion. Into relationships, as quiet cynicism wrapped in logic. You become too functional to be free, too mature to be spontaneous, too polite to be real. Because somewhere along the way you learned that intensity is wrong, that taking up space is selfish, that speaking too clearly is offensive. And the more you swallow, the more you intoxicate yourself. And still, the world applauds, because it benefits from your silence. But rage doesn't vanish. It shapeshifts. And if you don't honor it, it leaks. Through breakdowns, through illness, through self-sabotage dressed as accidents. You miss the call, you forget the deadline, you say, "It's fine," when it's killing you. But inside, you're screaming. And that scream, ignored for decades, becomes a ghost, a specter haunting your choices, your tone, your gaze. Until one day, you look in the mirror and don't know who's staring back. And you feel anger, but don't know why. That's when I cracked. Not from sadness and from rage. Clean, ancient, holy rage. Rage at having betrayed myself for so long in exchange for their comfort. Rage at letting my truth rot in the name of harmony. That rage didn't break me. It brought me home. Because behind it was someone waiting. Someone real. Someone I had buried to keep being liked. Starting over isn't about becoming someone new. It's about unearthing who was buried. The version of you that got silenced by, "Not now, be nice, don't make trouble." When you begin to disobey the character you've played for decades, people flinch. They look at you the same or dying, but with suspicion. You who always said yes are now saying no. You who always stayed quiet are drawing lines. You, the easy one, are suddenly not so convenient. And that shakes them, because your erasure kept things comfortable for them. That's when loneliness shows up. Not the kind where no one's around, but the kind where no one sees you anymore. You start pulling away from the rooms that clapped when you stayed small, from the friendships that fed on your edits, from the love that only worked because you disappeared. It's a quiet grief. You realize most of your connections weren't affection, they were transactions. You weren't loved, you were useful, you were present, but never whole. Now, by daring to be full, you become disruptive. Your truth exposes the false peace of others. But something happens in that emptiness. You start hearing yourself again. What once felt like chaos begins to form language. You realize your sensitivity isn't weakness, it's a compass. Your intensity isn't too much, it's truth. Your anger wasn't a flaw, it was direction. And slowly a new emotional terrain forms. It has no map, no certainty, but it has something you've never had. Ground that is fully yours. No audience, no performance, just space to be intact. You start to move differently. Speak without fear of rejection. Feel without apology. Celebrate without shame. And every small act of presence becomes sacred. A private revolution. A quiet declaration. You no longer exist to be accepted. You exist to be recognized and by yourself. There's a kind of peace that doesn't feel like rest, it feels like presence. At first it's uncomfortable, because there's no applause, no audience, no one saying, "You're doing great." It's just you, with yourself. No noise from others, no echo of expectation, no need to perform. This peace is raw, quiet, unglamorous, but it's real. And in it, for the first time, you find room to exist, without convincing, without shrinking, without calibrating every word, every gesture, every breath. For once, there's space for you inside you. When you stop erasing yourself, time changes. Relationships change. You begin to see how many of your connections were built on omission. You realize how often you were loved not for who you were, but for what you hid. The silence, the niceness, the diplomacy, they were just masks over the pain of never being whole. And now, when you choose to show up fully, you disrupt people still living in fragments. That's not selfishness, it's consequence. Any soul that integrates will shake the ground of those who still benefit from your absence. In this new space, you learn a hard truth. Being yourself doesn't guarantee being accepted. It guarantees being real. And that changes everything. Because now the terms of belonging are no longer external. You're not looking to fit. You're choosing to exist. And those who can't handle your presence will have to sit with their own absence. This isn't about pushing people away. It's about finally refusing to leave yourself behind. I spent 30 years editing myself to fit. Now I choose to expand even if it unsettles. I speak with weight. I feel with depth. I exist with density, not to prove anything, but because I finally understand. I wasn't born to be pleasant. I was born to be whole. And if my wholeness makes others uncomfortable, maybe it's time to remind the world. Real presence doesn't ask for permission. It arrives, it stays, and it transforms. There comes a moment when the character collapses. It's not dramatic. It's silent. A subtle exhaustion, like nausea of the soul. You're tired of calculating every sentence, shaping every gesture, measuring every reaction. Your body starts sending signals. The laugh doesn't fit. The touch feels hollow. The gaze searches but finds nothing. And you realize you've spent your whole life trying to be liked and forgot how to be real. Acceptance came at a brutal cost, and deep down you know, continuing to please is a slow death in disguise. That's when the crossing begins. It's not heroic. It's lonely. Because the world doesn't know what to do with someone who stops explaining, who no longer bends, who says no without a smile and yes without fear. You become foreign to your old circle, a symbolic threat to those still pretending. But for the first time, you feel something no amount of approval could ever deliver. Presence. That raw, irreversible feeling of being whole, even in ruins. This is the final choice, not between being liked or rejected, but between being someone else or being you. Between decorating your pain to function or allowing your truth to take up space. Because as long as you're living to be liked, you're trapped in a theater with no audience. A script where your life is a background role in someone else's narrative. And you weren't born for that. You weren't born to shrink. You were born to shake the ground when you stand. If you made it this far, you already know what needs to happen. It's not about confronting the world. It's about no longer fleeing yourself. And that requires a ritual, a rupture, a clear, irreversible choice. Today, you bury the character who lived to be accepted and finally begin the life of someone real.